This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval. I'm here with Michigan State insider Corey Robinson of SpartanMag, the Michigan State affiliate of the Rivals.com Yahoo network. Corey and I have worked together closely. For those of you who don't know, I came from Buckeye Grove, the Ohio State affiliate, to Buckeye Scoop. I still cover Rutgers for Rivals, so we work together closely, covering mostly specifically recruiting. But it's great to have him on talking about Michigan State versus Ohio State in a game that actually looks like it's going to happen as of the timing of this recording, Tuesday afternoon. Corey, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for reaching out and bringing me on.
Absolutely. And, I think this year's been interesting for Michigan State. I personally wasn't expecting too much from them. First year in Mel Tucker, didn't get to have spring ball to kind of, implement new systems with tons of new coaching staff. Obviously a little bit of a transition period always when you're switching coaches from Mark D'Antonio to Mel Tucker. And, this season's been weird for Michigan State. They open up with a loss to Rutgers. Then they go on the road and win their rivalry game against Michigan, who at the time at least was a top 10 team and we thought was pretty good. They looked pretty good beating Minnesota week 1. And then, their next two games after that, 49-7 loss to Iowa, 24-0 loss to Indiana. So that is a combined 73-7. And then last week they come back and at home they upset number 8 Northwestern. I think they became the only team other than Alabama and Georgia to notch 2 top 10 wins at obviously the time they beat those opponents. So, Corey, I just want to hear your thoughts. What are your initial reactions to Michigan State and kind of first impression through 5 games? I mean, they're 2-3. What do you think of the program under Mel Tucker? Where is it now? Where is it going to go?
I definitely agree with the spring thing that you're talking about. Missing that was huge because not only was it a new coaching staff in place, I think they're replacing like 15 or 16 starters on both sides of the ball and punter, which has been an issue for them this year. So you add that into the fact of not having the spring and the transition. So that was probably speaks to some of the inconsistencies for them, breaking in so many key new players. But everybody, for the most part, came in knowing it was going to be a bit of a rebuild. Mark D'Antonio, as everyone knows, did a great job here, but the last few years, he kind of maybe lost a little quality control, and the recruiting efforts weren't necessarily up to par, even for what they were doing before. So I think you see some of that. So it'll take time for Mel Tucker and his staff to really get it rolling with their way. But I think there's a lot of optimism here when you look at their recruiting and the philosophies and just how tough the team is actually playing, even if they're outmanned.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Mel Tucker. I was a big fan of what he did at Colorado. Obviously that stint didn't last too long, but it was clear that program was moving quickly in the right direction. And while he's got a little bit of a tougher task in front of him with, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, in the same division, Rutgers is definitely improving under Greg Schiano. Maryland has shown at least some flashes. Indiana is obviously having a great year. It's not going to be easy, but I do think Mel Tucker knows what he's doing as far as building a program, building a culture. And I think Michigan State will definitely be more of a threat that we're used to, at least during the prime Mark D'Antonio years, in just a few years' time, versus what we maybe seen the last few years. Now, focusing on 2 games specifically, the win over Michigan, maybe not as much now that we know what Michigan is, but they still looked really good in that game against what was a top 10 team at the time. And then last week against Northwestern, they won 29-20. It was, I'll say, a closer score, in my opinion, than what the game actually was. I think Northwestern did a better job in the second half, but I thought Michigan State was in control the whole way. How can a team look like they have in their 2 wins versus, again, 73-7 in the 2 games versus ranked Iowa and Indiana, and losing by 11. And honestly, that was probably closer than in score than what the game actually played out to be. Rutgers jumped out pretty big there. How can a team be so different looking? And I guess my question really is, can Michigan State, if they play the way they did against Northwestern, is that good enough to beat an Ohio State type of team?
Yeah, for the differences, I'd say that the two major things that have jumped out in the 2 wins as opposed to the 3 losses is turnovers. They only turned the ball over once in the 2 wins, where the 3 losses, I mean, I think they had 7 against Rutgers, I think 4 against Iowa, and I think maybe 4 against Indiana, 3 or 4. So that's been a huge issue for them. Where against Michigan, they didn't turn the ball over at all, and against Northwestern, they did once, but then they got the ball right back because Northwestern fumbled the play after. And then just running the ball, the difference in the 2 wins, I believe they're over 150, 160 yards a game rushing, where the 3 losses, they've been under 100, which some of that can be scored in situation where you pass more. And I think in the games that they've won, they've done a better job of attacking deep because they do have some good speed at the wide receiver position. And the quarterback, Rocky Lombardi, I think his strength is probably deep throws. He kind of struggles with decision making and moderate throws sometimes. And that's a lot of what his interceptions have been, is on the outs in the mid-range thing. So I guess it's just basically not turning the ball over, because even if they probably turn the ball over 5 times against Rutgers, they probably still win that game. That 6th fumble on the punt return right inside the 10 when they had momentum was huge, and that ended the game basically. And as far as Ohio State, that's probably a tough task for them to, even if they played as well as they played against Michigan and Northwestern. I don't know if that's enough for the talent disparity that they'll be facing this weekend against an Ohio State team, because they kind of struggle with stuff on the edge with speed, where Ohio State clearly has a lot of playmakers that can exploit that, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple strengths, weaknesses. I want to talk about the Spartans offense. Want to hear their strengths, want to hear their weaknesses, and I want to hear players that Ohio State fans should know about. But it's very interesting because Ohio State's secondary has been pretty porous this year, even against, they're not the best opponents. And there could be some players, we're not going to mention any names, but there could be some players out on this defense that are normally starters or key contributors. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on Michigan State's offense. You mentioned the deep ball being a strength. Is that something they're going to look to use this weekend? What other strengths do they have? Where are the weaknesses, and who are the players to know?
Yeah, so I would expect that they would try to take deep shots, because as you guys have probably known watching Michigan State in the last few years, they haven't had a ton of speed at the wide receiver position, where this is probably the most athletic and quickest group they've had. Jaden Reed, he had to sit out last year as a grad transfer. He's a very talented player. That seems to be the guy that most teams kind of key on and double or put a safety over the top most of the time with him. But Jalen Naylor, he's a guy that has a ton of speed. The only thing that stopped him the last 2 years was injuries. He's been huge for us the entire year. He was big in the Northwestern game as well, so he's a name to watch. And then Trey Mosley and Ricky White are a couple other wide receivers that kind of teeter on that 3rd, 4th receiver. They both had some injuries. Mosley was back last week, but White was gone, so I'm not positive if White will be back. But the wide receiver position is definitely their strength. Tight end is a weakness for them right now. They just didn't really recruit the position well, and Matt Dotson, an Ohio native, is out injured. And Gillison is out injured against Northwestern, so if he's not back, that minimalizes tight end. At running back, Jordan Simmons, he missed the Northwestern game. He's a true freshman out of Georgia with legit speed. he's a guy that they would probably need to have to threaten the edge or maybe take that big play chance. But if he's not available, you'll see a lot of Connor Hayward. Um, his strengths are he's a good pass blocker and good catching the ball out of the backfield. Had a big game against Northwestern where he just finished under 100, but burst is and speed's probably an issue. But he's a guy that they rely on for the extra pass blocking. On defense, Antoine Simmons, a guy that was Buckeye fans know being committed to Ohio State. He's the number one leader on the defense. He's having an All-American year for Michigan State. Defensive tackle is a huge strength for them. They got Deshaun Mallory, Naquan Jones, Jacob Slade out of Ohio, and Jalen Hunt. Those four are pretty much four starters that have been interchangeable. Defensive ends, it's kind of hit or miss with Panashuk and Beasley. They have a play here or there, but the depth isn't where it needs to be. And then in the secondary, Shakir Brown, he's got 5 interceptions this year. He's always been a pretty good player, but I think having Harlan Barnett back coaching the secondary has kind of got his focus up a little bit more. So you're starting to see him reap the benefits with the skill he has. Xavier Henderson from Ohio is a huge leader for Michigan State. He's having a really good year. Chris Jackson out of Georgia at corner. He missed a couple games, but he's back. He's probably the top cover corner that we have. And then Michael Dowell is starting to kind of emerge in his role of defending the run a little bit. But overall, I think the speed from Noah Harvey at linebacker, the lack of speed might be a issue matching up against some of the guys that Ohio State will throw at him.
So what's Michigan? Is Michigan State running? You know, you mentioned a bunch of defensive tackles. Are they running? Like what kind of defense are they running? Are they running a 4-3 cover 2? Are they running an odd front? How have they been? I know D'Antonio used to change up a lot of defensive looks, especially against Ohio State. It was a little bit different though. I mean, they were having to account, I think, a little bit more for the quarterback run with JT Barrett, Braxton Miller. But you know, Justin Fields, while he certainly can run, he hasn't really run a ton. That's intentional. I don't think they're going to have to account for that as much as they did when they played Urban Meyer. So like, what kind of defense, what's the system that they've been running at Michigan State this year?
Their base is a 4-2-5 defense. So they got the 5 defensive backs. They're getting to the point now where as guys are picking up the scheme and getting more game ready, they're able to put a 6th defensive back in there at times when they want to. Northwestern, it looked a little bit different. They did a lot more having guys stand up on the edge than they had prior to that. So I'd expect that wrinkle to remain going against Ohio State, where a guy from another Ohio kid, Chase Klein, he's a linebacker, but he has a real strength coming off the edge as a stand-up guy. So I think they're a multiple defensive set. They haven't been able to be as multiple as the coaches would want to, I don't think, without having spring ball. But you're starting to see them add more wrinkles to the defense as they've gone along in the year. But 4-2-5 is definitely the base.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what, and no surprise given Mel Tucker's there, you know, what the Jim Tressel staff liked to run during his time at Ohio State, where they had kind of that 5th defensive back as a linebacker safety hybrid. They called it the star at Ohio State. Not sure what they're calling it at Michigan State, but it's funny because when Tressel ran it, I mean, it was good. It was very effective. You know, Jim Haycock running the defense for the most part during the Tressel era, but it was almost like ahead of its time, because that's probably a defense where with the passing game being so prevalent in today's world of football, it's, you know, to have those guys who can, you know, play in coverage, but also come up and stuff the run coming out of the defensive backfield. I think it's crucial. So Ohio State fans should be pretty familiar with that. pretty familiar with guys like Antoine Simmons, Xavier Henderson. You mentioned Chase Klein, Mike Dowell, also from Ohio. They also have, as you mentioned, Connor Hayward on the offensive side of the ball, the brother of former Ohio State defensive lineman and current Pittsburgh Steelers All-Pro Cameron Hayward. Ohio State actually was looking at Connor as a linebacker in the class of 2017. Didn't pull the trigger. Now they play against him another year. So that should be all interesting matchups to see some of those old faces. Now, Corey, winding down here toward a prediction, what are the keys to the game for Michigan State if they want to pull off this upset? I don't think I've seen a spread come out. I think a lot of books have not touched this yet. I have to imagine it's probably going to be somewhere around like 31 points, something along those lines. How do you, what are the keys to the game for you if Michigan State is going to pull off one of the biggest upsets of the college football season?
I think they got to control the line of scrimmage, both sides. They got to slow down the running game for Ohio State, which I feel like they could probably do that semi-effectively. But the big thing is they've got to be able to run against Ohio State to kind of try and win the time of possession and keep the ball out of Justin Fields' hands a lot. And then, of course, they can't turn the ball over, and they're going to have to force a good amount of turnovers, I think, to create the separation that they would need to pull off an upset of that level.
Yeah, I think honestly, I mean, I hope everyone's safe and healthy and all that, but I truly think, having multiple players out for Ohio State due to either testing positive for coronavirus or contact tracing, or, obviously Ryan Day is not going to be coaching this game. There may be other coaches out. I think that's probably Michigan State's best chance. I think Rocky Lombardi with the deep ball could do some damage. I mean, he's got to be on. The receivers have to be on. Ohio State secondary, forget even if they're not missing anyone, they've been susceptible to some damage and some big plays through the air this year, as you saw in the second half of the Indiana, Penn State, and even the Rutgers game. So, I think they are going to have to run the ball to win this one and control the clock, basically play keep away from Ohio State. I think it would certainly help to have a bunch of players out of this game to kind of even the playing field when you talk about the talent disparity. And then on defense, to your point, they're going to have to force turnovers. They're going to have to win the turnover battle. Indiana had a chance because they turned Justin Fields over 3 times. And they were able to hit some big plays through the air. So I think all those things are going to have to come into fruition. My team came in with the stat correction. And by my team, I mean me just Googling it. It looks like the spread is out. It's currently at 23.5. Obviously that factors in a little bit the uncertainty around some players on Ohio State's roster. So interesting number there. Over under is about 59.5. So, you're looking at maybe something like a 42-17 type game Vegas is predicting. Corey, I would love to hear your thoughts. How do you think this game plays out, and what's your final score prediction?
Yeah, I think I could see something similar to that. Maybe, I don't know, 35-14 Ohio State wins. I guess the uncertainty of who's going to play and not play, just as this whole year's been, makes it harder with predictions. But I think something around those lines would be where I'd sit right now.
Yeah, I have to dig into this one a little bit. Obviously, probably more than your side. We're going to have a little bit more information on our side. Obviously, not going to share because we want to stay in Ohio State's good graces about who may or may not play in this game. I don't know how much it matters all that much. I think Justin, I'm comfortable saying I feel pretty good that Justin Fields is going to play. And I think same with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. I think those 3 guys are going to be hard for most teams to keep up with, specifically Michigan State. So I probably see something around that, as you said, high 30s, maybe low 40s. They could be a little bit conservative and just try to run things out. I do think Michigan State will have a little bit of success through the air, maybe score in the low 20s. So yeah, I mean, probably looking at a 3 touchdown game on my book, but looking forward to actually well, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, seeing some Ohio State football this weekend. Obviously, last week's game against Illinois was canceled, but we got an excellent breakdown from Corey Robinson of SpartanMag. Corey, appreciate the time. Thanks for joining Around the Oval, presented by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. Everyone, remember, go to revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington to get today's rates. Todd is great to work with. I personally have not worked with him, but Kirk has, financing his new house with him. Many people on the board have as well. So make sure you check him out. revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington. Corey, thanks again for joining the show. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we get to see some football.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.